The frigid Montana wind screamed through the evergreens like a freight train in the night, carrying the sharp tang of blood and the faint cries of someone fighting for their last breath. Jack Harlan bolted upright in his isolated cabin, his calloused fingers wrapping around the old Smith & Wesson revolver tucked under his pillow. Through the iced-over pane, he spotted Hera's shadowy form in ripped satin and lace, staggering through the knee-deep drifts like a specter from his darkest regrets. When she crumpled at his threshold, her auburn hair fanning out against the pristine snow like a crimson stain, he froze. Little did he know this stranger would shatter the solitude he'd clung to for a decade, forcing him to reckon with a vendetta that had defined his life. But as those piercing blue eyes flickered open and met his own, Jack Harlan glimpsed his undoing reflected the eyes of his sworn enemy. What happens when mercy collides with hatred? And saving a life means igniting a fire that could consume everything. In the unforgiving Rockies, grudges run as deep as the canyons, and Jack was about to learn that some wounds never truly heal. The cabin perched like a forgotten relic on a ridge 40 miles west of Bozeman, where the wilds swallowed men's secrets whole. Jack had come here 10 years back, fleeing the ghosts of a life soaked in bloodshed. He'd been a sheriff once, but one fateful shootout in a dusty Billings saloon had changed it all. Now he lived off the land, trapping and hunting, convincing himself that isolation was peace. Or so he'd thought until that night. She was barely alive when he hauled her inside, her skin ghostly pale, lips tinged purple from the sub-zero chill. The gunshot in her side had soaked through her fancy gown sapphire silk that screamed high society, worth more than his entire spread. This wasn't some homesteader's kin lost in a squall. Jack had patched enough holes in outlaws to recognize privilege when he saw it. As he sliced away the ruined fabric, exposing unscarred skin that spoke of pampered days, she stirred. "Please." Her voice came out refined, almost musical, laced with terror that twisted his gut. "They're after me. They'll kill us both if they catch up." "Who's they?" Jack kept his tone, even as he stanched the bleeding with boiled rags. Her eyes, those damn vivid blues, fluttered open. "I can't say, but if you got any decency left, hide me." She passed out again, leaving him with a puzzle that reeked of trouble. As he dressed the wound and draped her in his threadbare quilt, a nagging dread settled in. Fate didn't drop angels on your doorstep without demanding a price. 3 days later, she awoke, frail but fierce. She called herself Emma Haisa Blatant Fib, but Jack played along. Everything about her screamed deception, except the way her gaze softened when she thanked him, like he was some hero instead of a washed-up recluse. "You pulled me from death's door," she said, propping herself up in his cot, the blanket slipping to reveal an elegant neckline that made him avert his eyes. "How can I ever make it right?" "No need," Jack muttered, stirring coffee over the wood stove. "Peel up and hit the trail. This ain't no spot for fine ladies." But she didn't budge. Emma Hayes, or whoever she was, had a knack for turning his rough-hewn shack into something resembling home. She whipped up stews from his canned goods that tasted like Sunday dinners from his youth, darned his shirts with precise stitches that mesmerized him, and come evenings, she'd recite verses from a battered poetry book she'd salvaged from her ordeal. "Listen to this, Mr. Harlan," she murmured one night by the crackling fire, her voice wrapping around the words like velvet. The road not taken, 2 paths diverged in a yellow wood. Robert Frost. Jack paused his whittling, surprised. "You know it?" she asked, tilting her head. "Used to," he replied, his voice gruff. "Before life went sideways." Before what? That was his cue to send her packing. But instead, he spilled fragments of his past the badge he'd worn, the regrets that haunted him. She listened with an intensity that made him feel exposed, valued, like maybe redemption wasn't a pipe dream after all. It was reckless, this budding connection, more perilous than any standoff he'd faced. "You're different from most men," she said softly, her eyes tracing his rugged features in a way that stirred embers he'd long thought extinguished. "Is that a compliment or a curse, Emma?" She smiled, a radiant thing that could thaw glaciers. "Haven't figured it out yet." But Jack Hadda was tumbling headlong for a woman shrouded in secrets, and every fiber screamed it would end in ruin. He just underestimated how spectacularly. The locket tumbled from her shawl like a damning clue. Jack scooped it up, flipping it open under the lantern's glow. Inside, an inscription, L. Reed, 1890. L. Reed. The name slammed into him like a gut punch, draining the color from his face. In that instant, the pieces clicked, the posh attire, the polished accent, those unforgettable blue eyes that had plagued his nightmares. Lila Reed, the daughter of Victor Reed, the cattle baron whose nephew Jack had gunned down a decade ago in that fateful Billings brawl. "You were planning to come clean sometime, right, Lila?" She stood rigid in the doorway, fresh from tending the horses, snowflakes dotting her hair like stars. Her complexion blanched as she eyed the locket. "Jack, His voice roughened. "No more bull. I've swallowed enough lies to last me." She collapsed into a chair, hands shaking as she took the locket, their fingers brushing in a spark that defied the betrayal. "I didn't know it was you at first," she whispered. "I was fleeing, bleeding out, and you were my miracle." "From what?" The tale unraveled in jagged shards. Harlan Voss, the oil tycoon who'd bartered for her hand to seal a merger that would crush small ranchers from Missoula to Helena. The forced betrothal, her frantic dash toward the Canadian border, was capped by a bullet from her father's hired guns. "He's sunk millions into Dad's operations," she said, tears carving paths down her cheeks. "If I bail, he'll ruin us all, every cowhand, every family tied to our spreads. They'd starve because of my defiance." Jack should have felt justified. This was Reed's spawn, weeping over messes not his to mop. But he saw only a woman ensnared by powers beyond her, mirroring his own entrapment in that long-ago violence. "Your cousin," he said quietly. "Ben." It wasn't cold-blooded. Fair draw, but he was green, liquored up. Her whisper, "I know. You know, monster," despite what Dad preached. "Monsters don't save strangers in blizzards." She rose, silhouetted against the window where moonlight etched her in silver. Ben was a hothead, always chasing trouble. Dad tried reining him in, but some folks are wired for heartbreak. The quiet stretch taut, fraught with unspoken futures. "So what's next?" Jack asked. "We both know this road leads nowhere good." Lila turned, her eyes blazing with raw need. "What if it does? What if we bolt together? Running won't erase the blood between us, Lila. Won't fix what I took from your kin." "Maybe not." She stepped nearer, her scent of wildflowers cutting through the pine smoke. "But it could forge something new, something real." When she grasped his hand, he didn't recoil. When she pressed close, he didn't retreat. And when her lips met his, parting in a silent plea, Jack Harlan surrendered to a sin that felt like salvation. The kiss began hesitantly, a query in the dim light. Then she sighed a yielding sound that unleashed a torrent. His arms encircled her waist, drawing her flush as she dissolved against him. She tasted of hope and hazard, everything he'd forsaken. "This is insanity," he breathed against her mouth. "Then let's go mad," she replied, her smile igniting the shadows. Beyond the walls, the gale wailed omens, but they were deaf to it all. Those Rocky Mountain nights dragged eternal, cold voids that amplified a man's demons. But that evening, entwined with Lila Reed, Jack unearthed the heat that scorched away decades of remorse. She approached like a vision, her chemise shimmering in the embers' glow, every sway a temptation crafted to unravel resolve. "You certain?" His words rasped with want and wariness. "I've never been surer," she said, perching beside him. "I'm done letting fear rule me." Her fingertips mapped the scar on his torso, an ancient slug from his deputy days, and his pulse quickened where she lingered. Tell me its story, she urged, her lips following suit. Rustler ambush in 85. Thought he had the drop. And this? Her hand ventured lower to a knife gash. Barroom scrap. Can't recall the spark. He captured her hand, kissing it. Lila, you don't know I want to, she cut in, sealing doubts with a kiss of fire and fervor. I crave every tale your scars whisper. Let's author fresh ones. She was exquisite, her form in the lamplight a siren's call the arch of her back, her hair cascading like a waterfall over linen, the gasps when his touch explored forbidden terrain. It was her gaze seeing him as whole, not fractured that undid him utterly. When she bowed under him, nails scoring his back, he was adrift. When she murmured his name like a vow, he was anchored. Afterward, limbs entwined in moonlit sheets, her head pillowed on his chest, Jack grasped love's ambush. Swift, savage, unstoppable. Penny for your thoughts? She asked sleepily. That I'm a damn fool. Why? Falling for a woman fate says I can't keep. She lifted her head, eyes earnest. What if you already do? What if love bends the rules? Before he could retort, distant whinnies pierced the night. Lila tensed. They're here. Jack snatched his revolver as serenity shattered. How many? 24 at least. She dressed hastily. Through the glass, torches bobbed like malevolent eyes, hoofbeats thundering with spurred menace-seasoned enforcers encircling like vultures. The rear pane, Jack hissed, loading rounds. The path drops to the valley. No, Lila's tone steeled. No more fleeing. I won't watch you bleed for my spinelessness. Lila, a bellow echoed, laced with ironclad command. Harlan, I know she's in there. Hand her over, and I'll grant you a quick end instead of slow. Victor Reed had arrived, backed by a posse. Jack peeked. 25 riders in a news formation, rifles glinting. Pros, all, smug with superior odds. Last warning, Harlan, send my girl out, or we torch the place. Lila joined him at the window. Dad, she shouted, I'm done being your pawn. Silence fell, heavier than lead, then Victor's snarl. You've always been headstrong, kid, but you'll toe the line. Voss awaits his bride, and he'll have her. That's when Jack realized escape meant war, and shielding love demanded gambling it all. He kissed her fiercely, tasting salt and steel. No matter what, loving you was my best shot. Outside, shadows tightened. Inside, foes turned lovers braced for hell. Dawn bled over the Montana peaks, staining the snowy field in hues of fire and frost. 25 gunmen ringed the cabin, steam rising from their mounts, barrels aimed true. At the heart sat Victor Reed astride a massive bay, a titan at 60, exuding dominion over empires he'd built on broken backs. Lila, his command boomed. Enough games with this thug. Time to head home. The door creaked open. Jack emerged first, palms up but poised, his steely gaze sweeping the threats. Lila followed, jaw set despite quivering hands. Hey, Dad, she said, voice carrying like a rifle crack. Victor's stern facade cracked briefly a flicker of paternal relief then hardened. You look worn, girl. This is what consorting with killers yields. This is liberty, Lila shot back, something you'd never grasp. Liberty? Victor's laugh rang hollow. You call shacking up with the bastard who dropped your cousin Ben liberty? You call torpedoing our legacy liberty? Ben's blood is on his hands. It was a clean fight, Lila countered. You know that. What I know, Victor growled low, is Harlan Voss has poured 200 grand into our outfit. He wants returns via your vows. Skip it, and he bankrupts every soul from here to Great Falls. That's your liberty? Dooming good folks to the poorhouse for your whims. The barbs landed. Lila paled, doubt flickering as guilt resurfaced the chains she'd fled, now yanking her back. A rider advanced. Harlan Voss, paunchy but predatory-eyed at 65. There's a fix, he drawled. Wed me voluntarily, and I'll sweeten the pot. Your old man retains half his holdings, hands stay employed. Balt, He shrugged. Contract got penalties. Jack boiled over. She's staying put, you vultures. 25 hammers cocked. A symphony of doom. You don't call shots, Harlan, Victor sneered. You're lucky I let you bid adieu. Maybe, Jack said coolly. But how many of yours are you sacrificing for ego? The standoff teetered on chaos's brink. Then Lila interposed, voice slicing sharp. Halt. She strode center stage, every stare pinned, regal and relentless. Mr. Voss, you crave Reed assets without the wife you don't truly want. What if I deliver sans ceremony? Voss's brows knit. Talk. Straight business. 60 to 40 your favor. Full access to our trails and wells, plus cash for the hassle. And the funds for a ghost. Voss queried. Lila's grin turned icy, Victor's own. From Dad's coffers, naturally. After all, if Lila Reed perishes in a freak mishap, her share reverts, funding her last wishes. Hush blanketed the scene, and even the breeze stilled. Victor eyed her, pride mingling with shock. You'd fake your end? I'd vanish, Lila clarified. Lila Reed succumbs to the wilds on route north. Body lost forever, storms claim plenty. But Dad, heartbroken, upholds the deal. Voss nodded, intrigued. Slick. But him. He jabbed at Jack. Loose end snag. What ends? Lila's poise held. Jack Harlan falls too, gun down resisting. Cabin ashes in the Freya, frontier fluke. Jack got it. She was gifting him freedom by obliterating his past, so they could rebuild as phantoms. Dad, Lila softened, the child pleading once more, grant me this grace. Let me choose my exit. Victor studied her, beholding the force she'd become canny, bold, his mirror. At last, he dipped his head. Boys, erase this. Lila Reed and Jack Harlan bit the dust 2 days back. Rest his mop up. 3 years on, in a sun-drenched Oregon valley where orchards bloomed eternally, a woman named Maria Santos watched her husband, Diego, break a spirited mare in the paddock. He moved with timeless assurance, though his locks were cropped, his hands gentled by peaceful labors. To locals, he was a settler who'd wed a widow with fertile acres and big aspirations. No one pried. In the West, past stayed buried. The missive arrived that morn, scripted in familiar scrawl. Querida Maria, the venture thrives. Voss is content, though he gripes about his vanished fiancée. I spin yarns of sorrow. Crews praise the upgrades wealth softens, even moguls. I ponder you often. May the Pacific breezes favor you. Your steadfast ally, V. Maria pocketed it near her heart, then strolled to Diego, her palm cradling the swell where their firstborn stirred. Word from back east? He asked, eyes on the horse. From a pal, she said, fence-leaning. Deal's solid. Diego nodded, grasping the unsaid. They'd torched their former selves in that Montana blaze, along with vendettas and woes. What rose here was humble, authentic theirs alone. They'd absorbed the frontier's harsh wisdom. Sometimes, shedding all reveals your core. Sometimes, death brings true life. And sometimes, love justifies any toll, even rebirth as strangers. They were unbound, united, rooted, and that trumped empires of dirt and dollars. What do you think about this tale of forbidden love, bitter feuds, and bold escapes? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Do you side with Jack and Lila's risky romance? Or think family loyalty should have won out? Share your stance. I'd love to hear your hot takes.